Okay, so Be'ezras Hashem, it's really a treat to be back here with the Chevra. So thank you everybody for making an effort to be here. So we're going to pick up a little bit from where we left off with our preparation for Purim, and there's really no need to be aware of what we spoke about prior to Purim, because Purim was kind of aligning ourselves with the reality that ultimately a person in this world is operating from a place of doubt, that the nature of this world is doubtful. Now that's not an accidental doubt. It's not that there was once certainty that got destroyed and now we find ourselves in a place of doubt, but it's an essential doubt, meaning it's a suffix atzmi. It's an essential doubt that's not contingent upon clarification. Generally, when we speak about a suffix b'mikra, a doubt by chance, so it's simply because it's either A or B and it's not determinant whether we know it's A or B, and therefore it's omed v'suffix. It's tied up in doubt. Suffix be'etzem, an essential doubt, which is somewhat of a difficult category to find within the mind, but the Meforshim on Shas speak about it. It's the reality that there's a doubt because that's the nature of the thing being revealed. The doubt is not waiting to be clarified. It's not one of two options that needs to be seen in the light of evidence, which is which, but rather the emergence of this thing, the quality of this thing, is that it rests in a state of doubt. The doubtful nature of reality, the doubtful nature of the Eitz Hadas Tov V'Ra, means that life is one that is cut through with an element of doubt, of not knowing. And Chazal have given us ways to grapple with that world. I was thinking at the end of Purim that we say about Mordechai HaTzadik, Ratzei l'roi v'achiv, that Mordechai was loved, he was appreciated by the majority of his brothers. And what comes to mind is that Mordechai HaTzadik, what comes out of Purim is really the svara of Rov, the utilization of the svara of Rov, of the majority principle. The majority principle dictates, and I'm taking this from the Lumdus of Rav Shimshon Raphael Hirsch, who explains in Chorev that this is the Lumdus of Rov, is that Rov is the acquiescence that HaKadosh Baruch Hu gives to human beings to live in a world of uncertainty, but to develop a posture of certainty in spite of the fact that it's not absolutely certain. Rov allows me to operate in a given situation under the conditions of certainty. I know what is what, because the majority points that way. Now that certainty that comes about by way of Rov is not absolute certainty. We don't know with absolute clarity, but rather Chazal, HaKadosh Baruch Hu has enabled Chazal to utilize this space of Rov, which allows us to live as if we have certainty in spite of the fact that we live in a world that is devoid of certainty. And after Purim, it's Ratzei l'roi v'achiv, that it's Rov, that in the end of the day, the celebration of Purim is that yes, there's a world of suffix, but nevertheless, we ask HaKadosh Baruch Hu to allow us to pray and to find Him in those sveikos themselves, to develop the chelik of Torah of Safek. I was thinking also that by the Tocha we see that Tachas asher lo yivadata es Hashem Elokecha b'simcha b'tuv levav mirov kol. Mirov kol, Rashi over there explains what rov kol means. It means that either they had a lot or they didn't have a lot. But mirov kol, read mistakenly, can be this description we're trying to understand. Rov and kol are polar opposites to one another. Rov is the implication of a majority which is necessary in the space where the total is not available to us. The total, right? We just had the solar eclipse, that it's always near totality. It's always coming close to totality, 99% totality, 98% totality. But nobody speaks of 100% totality because there's an awareness that in this world, 100% totality is unavailable to a person. That's the reality of suffix. But Rov Kol, the svara of Rov, is that HaKadosh Baruch Hu allows us to see Rov as if it's Kol, to see the majority rule, the tools that we use to get through the circuitous routes of doubt. The Torah wants us to live with that semblance of certainty in our minds. Mirov Kol. And so, but Purim taught us that ultimately we have Rov. We have the ability to find a standing in this world, even though HaKadosh Baruch Hu does not reveal Himself bevadaut, in certainty. And certainly, Havadai Shemo Ken Tilaso, Hashem is the only thing that is certain, but the human being is incapable of grasping that certainty of HaKadosh Baruch Hu in any certain way. And we have to develop it by way of Rov, from within Safek, and again, all of that develops the notion of Emunah. Emunah, in opposition to Yediyah, faith in opposition to knowledge, is what happens when a person comes up against the fact that there's a certain piece of information that will always be missing from me. After all is said and done by Shema Yisrael, Hashem Elokeinu, Hashem Echad, Kabbalah Sol Malchus Shemayim, Kabbalah Sol Mitzvos, what we say at the end is Ve'emunah Kol Zos. In the end of the day, what the Yiddish mind knows is that in spite of all of the intellectual precision we might have, in spite of all of the idea we might have, in the end of the day, ve'emuna kolzos. It will always rely upon the secret of choosing to believe in something in spite of the lack of absolute evidence. And so, when we try and cultivate ourselves from a place of yediyah, any not knowing is going to be seen as detrimental. Any not knowing is going to be seen as a symptom that needs to be gotten over. And a person could go to all sorts of doctors, wise men who might offer absolute certainty in the hopes of alleviating me from the burden of doubt. But if we look at things from a perspective of emunah, then doubt and the inability to know something with certainty is no longer a symptom, it's a feature of the entire thing. Adarabah, if I knew everything with certainty, there would be no room for faith. Emunah is what takes place when a person reaches the limit point in their mind where evidence, external evidence, can no longer support the internal truth that I choose to live by. And it's specifically in that suffix, in that place of not knowing, in the iyadiyah, that a person comes to understand the secret of emunah. So Purim leads us to this awareness that destabilizes us. It says that we don't know. And then we're forced to kind of grapple with the reality of, okay, how do I come back to finding some stability even though I don't know? And that's when we come into the world of emunah and rov, and that's what brings us to Pesach. Everybody with me so far? Now Pesach, so it would be reasonable to find, you can find a two-stage process very often. You find a thesis and an antithesis. That's not uncommon to find in the history of ideas, in the history of human experience, and the development of reality. That there seems to be a problem, and then there's a solution to the problem. That there's doubt of Pesach, of Purim, and then one would imagine that Pesach is going to represent the certainty that comes to alleviate that doubt. We learned how to live with the doubt of Purim, and now let the other side of the equation come out and reveal that, okay, so you thought there was doubt, and here's the light of certainty, here's the light of yediyah, here's the light of how you're going to know everything. You tolerated the first stage of doubt, you did well over there, you tolerated it in that low place, and now welcome to the good place where you no longer have any questions. That would be a very typical, neat model of the model of religious development, of spiritual development, that problem and then cure. But one of the things that has protected Yiddishkeit, and one of the singular, unique aspects about Yiddishkeit, in contradistinction to nearly every other spiritual path, is that we're never looking for a neat synthesis. We're not looking to find a solution to the problem. Because we're fully aware that it's more than a two-step process. It's not just the doubt of Purim and then the clarity of Pesach. But rather, Yiddishkeit says if Purim revealed something about reality, doubt, it's not our job to pretend that we can get over that now and return back to the safe ground of certainty. We now have to learn how to grapple with the world the way HaKadosh Baruch Hu created the world. And instead of saying that symptom needs to get undone so I can get healthy again, like every other religious or spiritual model wants to do, Yiddishkeit says if this is the symptom I have to live with as a human being in this world, by dint of the fact that I'm a creature, I'm not perfect, that means I'm in doubt, so let me figure out how to serve HaKadosh Baruch Hu with doubt. Let me stop running away from the doubt, thinking that I can knock it unconscious with a strong level of certainty, and let me cultivate a spiritual practice or a religious orientation that makes room for all of the sveikos and the not knowing, which is what we said Esther Malka really asked for, theoretically around the time of Pesach, which was Tinasem gam machar. Give me tomorrow as well. That's what Esther Malka wanted out of Haman and Achashverosh. Machar, we said, was Tzei lihilachem machar ba'amalek. Go out and battle Amalek tomorrow. And Chazal say, this tomorrow, what does it mean? We don't know what the word means. Even in Torah Shebechsav, there's a doubt. It's one of the psukim she'ein lehem hachra'ah. There's no clarification as to what that tomorrow nature is. Is it tomorrow I'll deal with the repercussions of the war, or tomorrow will be the war? And when Esther Malka asks, Tinasim gam machar, she says, give me the ability not to fight this scary reality of not knowing, but let me learn how to cultivate it and bring it into my holiness and bring it into my avodah. And that's what leads us to Pesach. Because what Pesach is far distant from an absolute revelation of clarified fact. Pesach is ultimately the celebration of freedom that comes about by way of the capacity to question. That the singular motif that seems to rest at the center of Leil HaSeder, as Rav Hutner points out, and as Chazal point out in the prerequisite halachos of what it means to properly be Mesaper Yetzias Mitzrayim, even if a person is alone, God forbid, it still has to be B'derech She'ela V'tshuva. Now, the fact that the process of telling myself the story of exile and redemption needs to be by way of question and answer, so if I'm with other people in an educational, pedagogical model, I understand. So then the tool of questioning and answering is a Socratic method of understanding. It's a well-trodden path of educational model. So I understand if there's other people, let me question. But the Rambam paskins l'halacha based on Chazal that even if I'm alone, I still have to say it over b'derech sheila v'tshuva, which shows us, as Rav Hutner would describe, that clearly the role of questioning and answering is far more than just the pedagogical tool that it offers, because there's no reason for that tool to be used when it's just me. Kasha is clear? Elama, it must be that a cheftza of the chelek of the mitzvah is sheila v'tshuva, meaning that there is a value to the question process, irrespective of whether I'm actually trying to clarify information. That in a model of teaching with other people, a question is simply a handmaiden for the sake of arriving at a future clarification. And when the answer arrives, the sheila should be thrown away. But when we see that there's an ontological value to the question, meaning that the question itself is inherently valuable, so then the question is no longer for the sake of cultivating a clarity that will reveal the answer to the question, but clearly the question itself is a spiritual tool that must be cultivated in and of itself, irrespective of an answer. And so what the tzaddikim point out is that, and what we're going to be working with in this sugi is a lot from the Sod Yesharim of Radzin. Now the Sod Yesharim of Radzin, Rav Gershon Henoch Leiner of Radzin, was one of the most remarkable Torah thinkers of the last, tekufa that we can remember. That Rav Gershon Henoch of Radzin was the architect really of Ishbitz and Radzin. He was the grandson of the Mei Shiloach, Rav Mordechai Yosef Leiner of Ishbitz, the son of Rav Yaakov Leiner, who was the Beis Yaakov. And really the Sod Yesharim wrote Mei Shiloach. He didn't write his father's writings. Well, he compiled his father's writings, but the Sod Yesharim was also very famous for his work on Tcheles. He was referred to as the Baal Tcheles. He was a person with remarkable future orientation, but most importantly, his Torah is really, really relevant to the spiritual state that a person finds themselves in 2024. And what we're going to speak about is the Sod Yesharim refers to the night of the Seder as Or HaShe'ela, the time where the light of questioning is revealed, the time where we're able to cultivate within ourselves the recognition that questioning plays a fundamentally significant role in the posture of what it means to be a Jewish person, in the posture of what it means to be a neshama. And these are questions that are not necessarily meant to be answered, but rather questions that are allowed to be lived with, to live through the question, to no longer seek an answer to stop the process of questioning, but to be put into question. And so we'll start with the fact that, generally speaking, the model of questioning in Torah was seen in the first model, that the question is just a handmaiden to wisdom, that asking questions, kushios, problems in a sugya, were all there so that we could eventually lead to a further clarification of the matter. And you see this already in Svarim, in Chazal, that you see that if it were not for the Chet HaEgel, there would have been no shichacha, there would have been no questioning within the Torah, things would have been revealed as it was. So clearly there's an ideal perspective of wisdom without the need for clarification. We see that if it were not for the Misa of Moshe Rabbeinu, the Lumdis would not have been forgotten. Oznil ben Kanaz wouldn't have had to return all of those halachos that were forgotten through his pilpul. So we see again that forgetfulness and questioning are hand in hand. If we didn't forget, we wouldn't have to question. Memela, there is a place where we see questioning as a negative symptom of concealment, of exile. And when the Arizal describes, when Rav Chaim Vital describes what his Rebbe would be doing when he would learn halacha, he says that he would sweat to the point of exhaustion, and he would bang to the point of loudness. Why? Because every kasha that a person encounters in limud halacha, every kasha question that a person encounters is a klipa, is a concealment that needs to be refined, undone, opened up so that the answer could be revealed. That the kushya, the problem that surrounds the wisdom that we need, is representative of something negative that needs to be cut through. We need to get rid of it. You see this in the Ramchal, that the Yegia Satorah and the Amela Satorah is only because Amalek rests in the world, and that really the Chita, the innermost point of Torah, which is Chita, which is like a piece of wheat, which is Gematria 22, which is the 22 letters of the Aleph Beis. Theoretically, we should be able to eat it right away without the need for preparation. But because of the Chita of the Eitz Hadas, now we have to put effort in, and what covers over Chita? What covers over Chita is Kash v'Teven. Kash v'Teven, says the Ramchal, are the issues, the questions that we encounter. Kash is Gematria 400, representative of the 400 men of Esav. Teven, I believe, is Gematria Yishmael. I'm not 100% sure, but the Ramchal has an arichas on it. And so we see again that questions and concealment that block out clarified thought are seen as symptoms of exile, seen as difficult things that need to be gotten through. and that the apex of wisdom is knowing and not being stuck in the question. So that's one model. But then we find when it comes time to celebrate Pesach, when it comes time to celebrate freedom, what we find is that ultimately it's within the questioning itself that we express the deepest connectivity that we have to HaKadosh Baruch Hu. Because just to state from the outset what we're going to try and get to, when my service of HaKadosh Baruch Hu is dependent upon a full knowledge and clarified vision and an absolute knowledge of what the answer to something is, so then that's very good as long as I know what the answer is. That's very good as long as I have those answers to stand upon. But what happens when those answers fall away? And what happens when even the language to begin to try and apply an answer falls away? At that point, theoretically, it's an ava shetali bedavar, batal hadavar, batal ava. If my connection to God and to myself and to all that is good in the world is built upon clarified wisdom and answers, so then when there's no answers, and we all know there's moments when there's no answers, that happens every day, so then a person is going to be pushed off their game and feel that I can't find HaKadosh Baruch Hu in here, and nafshi yarda sha'oila. At that point, questioning is identifiable as hell, as death, as struggling, sha'ola, going down to that place of questioning without answer, without having anything to stand upon. Because if I am so dependent on the clarified wisdom of knowledge, so then the fear of a question that knocks me off my game is a terrifying thing because it takes away my stability. And so Yiddishkeit wants to teach us a different way, especially the chayrus. The freedom of Pesach is freedom from an ava shetali bedavar. It's freedom from a contingent relationship upon HaKadosh Baruch Hu that is dependent upon anything other than the fact that I have emunah in Him. And therefore Pesach cannot be dependent on clarified answers. It has to be dependent on something that is independent, something that is always there, and that is the power of questioning. Because the light of Pesach is the opportunity for us all to say, Ma nishtana halayla hazeh mikol halaylos. That tzaddikim said that right before Ma nishtana, what's written in all of the Haggadahs is Kan ha-ben shoel. And this, for the tzaddikim, was the most significant point in the Seder night, because over here a person asks. That the freedom to ask a question is rooted in the comfort that knows that even if I'm asking a difficult question, the person that I'm asking the question to loves me enough to not be bothered by it. And that even though I'm asking a question that needs an answer, my love for the person that I'm questioning is so strong that I don't even need an answer. When the questioning is seen in its proper lens as an act of faith, as a struggle to find more clarity in spite of the fact that I'm not dependent on the clarity that I seek, at that point the she'ela becomes a way of serving HaKadosh Baruch Hu by way of reaching out and demanding or requesting more insight, requesting something more, but at the same point not needing that to be satisfied. The yearning itself becomes the connection to HaKadosh Baruch Hu. Nafshi b'she'elasi. My soul is expressed in its questionings. At least I'm asking the question, HaKadosh Baruch Hu. At least I'm asking the questions of where are you in this world, or how is it in this world, or the two general categories of questions that we ask every day, the ma, the what, and the me, and the who. The who is the orientation of Hashem. Who are you? Where are you? That's the question mitzad Brias Ha'olam. Those are the questions of Avram Avinu, me bara Elah, who created all of this? Who's the Bal Habira here? And then after Matan Torah, we have the question of ma, anachnu ma, Chazal is Gematria ma. Now we know who, we know the answer to the who. But now what we're trying to answer up is the what. The human mind is always connected to these two postures, the me and the ma, the who and the what. And we don't live in a space of answers, we live in a space of questioning. And the moment of freedom of Pesach is the opportunity to be okay with those questions, to realize that the questioning itself need not be answered. I can live with a question because the question itself is in fact proof enough to the fact that I'm connected to Hashem. Everybody with me so far?
So, aside from Matan Torah, Tzias Mitzrayim is probably the clearest revelation of what is. He's saying that I'm going to Tzias Mitzrayim, remembering that clarity, that is the clarity.
It's a clarity for the.
That's specifically when we have this.
Leil HaSeder Shishal Pesach is a celebration of Yitzias Mitzrayim, to the degree that we're celebrating Kriyas Yamsuf. What we're doing in Leil HaSeder is we're identifying the entire process that led us into Mitzrayim, the entire experience that we had while we were in Mitzrayim, and the process that begins within Mitzrayim and takes us out of Mitzrayim. The Asara Makos still took place within Mitzrayim. And so therefore what we're going over in the Haggadah and what Chazal are orienting us to is the freedom of interpretation and the necessity of questioning for the sake of clarifying this emunah. Because what we find in the Torah is ultimately Yetzias Mitzrayim is really only there so that we can teach it to our children later on. Which means to say that the event and the way that things actually took place are less important than the educational way in which we draw it back down into our lives afterwards. That it's Laman Yedu Doroseichem. That ultimately it's that we should be able to tell our children. Meaning that the purpose of Yetzias Mitzrayim is so that there should be a conversation about Yetzias Mitzrayim so that the future generations, which are removed by definition from the reality of Yetzias Mitzrayim, should have the ability to believe in Yetzias Mitzrayim. Emunah in Yetzias Mitzrayim. And so Yetzias Mitzrayim, the night of Yetzias Mitzrayim, it's not the doubt of Purim. It's not the not knowing of Purim. It's the celebration of the fact that, okay, Hashem, I'm not going to know anything. I have a way of relating to you, which is a way of asking questions to you. Asking a question of HaKadosh Baruch Hu, asking a question of a parent, asking a question in the Torah is the acknowledgement that I am confident enough. I believe enough in my stability and my rightful nature to ask this question that in my place of not knowing, I am willing to extend myself and break open the wall and try and know more. That is the power of questioning. Nafshi b'she'elasi. Kan haben shoel. Ribono shel olam, I'm asking you for all of these things. A person is not getting an answer to the she'elos that they're asking. Whether it's by way of tefillah, whether it's by way of seeking out clarity. Levi Yitzchak of Berditchev, like all of the tzaddikim, they would say the Manishtana. They would say the Manishtana along with the children, and the tzaddikim would say it before the children. And Rav Levi Yitzchak of Berditchev put his head down before being able to open up his mouth for the Manishtana, and had his head down on the table, and he kept his head down on the table for even longer, and longer, and longer, until finally it was clear that people were being bothered. Rav Levi Yitzchak opened up his eyes, and his eyes were red, swollen from tears, and he says, Ribono shel olam, 4 kashyas, 4 questions to ask. I have 1,000,000 questions to ask. I have infinite questions to ask, and I know that there's no answers to these questions. And you want me to relegate myself to 4 simple questions? I can't. Until he says, but Ribono shel olam, what I do know for sure is that with emunah, if you promise to give me the secret of emunah, then I don't need to ask any of the questions. That's the reality of Leil HaSeder. Leil HaSeder is not that, we've closed up the doubt opened up by Purim. That was the void, and now we have stability. Pesach is okay. Hashem, you revealed to us Purim. Okay, let's go. We're going to serve you in the questioning of it all. We're going to find you b'derech she'ela v'tshuva. A she'ela is a tzimtzum. A tzimtzum, a concealment. A she'ela is what happens when there's not enough clarity here. It's where a person finds themselves in a state of a void. An answer is the kav. An answer is the light of HaKadosh Baruch Hu coming back down into that place of emptiness. But when we learn that even the tzimtzum, when Hashem hides himself, when I don't know, that's also an encounter with HaKadosh Baruch Hu. So then what we're going to find is that she'elas chacham chatzi tshuvahu. That the question of a wise person is already half of the answer. Because ultimately the questioning is the answer. That the human being is meant to ask questions. That's what we do. That's what the freedom of Leil Pesach is. To destabilize ourselves for a moment, to realize that I have a lot of questions of you, HaKadosh Baruch Hu. I have a lot of things that I need from you. There are a lot of things that I would like in my life. There are a lot of points of knowledge that I want to be able to live with. And it's very difficult to try and figure out how to draw the answer actually down. But at least I can ask the question. On Pesach, we weaponize the asking of the question. Yeah, I'm happy to answer questions.
Isn't this unique to post-Korban Klal Yisrael? Meaning, because before that, there wasn't this constant doubt necessarily, because we saw open Nisim, we saw it.
Sure. But there was also a tremendous amount of avodah zarah in the time of the Beis Hamikdash was revealed. Meaning, there's a relative balance between concealment and revelation at every stage of existence. The moment where that wasn't fundamentally clear was prior to the Chet of Adam HaRishon and at the moment of Har Sinai. But Binyan Beis Hamikdash was a state of Geula, but not Geula Shlema. It was not the revelation of Mashiach. It was not Eliyahu Navi coming and answering all of the unanswerable questions. It was the stability of Klal Yisrael in their place, in their time, with the proper arrangements of all things. But at that moment, there was also the Yetzer Hara of Avodah Zarah. As long as there was Nevuah, there was Avodah Zarah. When the Beis Hamikdash was destroyed, when Nevuah was taken away, so now we have the Chacham Adaf Minavi. But Beis Hamikdash, as perfect as it was not yet perfect. And that's fundamental to understand. Does that make sense?
So they asked. So you would say that they asked Shiloh's even on the first Pesach after Yetzias Mitzrayim.
The questions they were asking after Yetzias Mitzrayim was, they were more existential questions. They were complaining. They were, Hashem, where are you already?
There were questions that were asked with the same
I would have to assume so, especially if the Rambam is saying that that it's a kiyum of Zecher L'Tzias Mitzrayim, that the model in which we do the Pesach Seder night is symbolic of the entire process. So I would imagine there were questions, but more than that, what the tzaddikim are trying to point out, that the entire process of exile and redemption itself is question and answer. Exile is the experience of a question. And what we have to be able to do, what Pesach allows us to do, is to realize that Hashem, even within a state of exile, even before the full revelation of clarity, I can still serve you as if I have absolute clarity. How? Through my questioning. Avram Avinu, this is how Avram Avinu came to find HaKadosh Baruch Hu. We spoke about this. The Meshiloach says this, that Avram Avinu says, could it be that this world is without an architect? Miyad hitzitz alav bal habira. Alav with an ayin. That Avram asked the question, and immediately the master of the house revealed himself upon Avraham. So the Meshiloach says, first off, it should say Hashem revealed himself to Avraham, not upon Avraham. What was the purpose for revealing himself upon Avraham? So this is just one makor that we're taking that discusses this idea. This is from the Sod Yesharim, but again, these ideas are expressed throughout the writings of these tzaddikim. So what the Sod Yesharim says, based on the Meshiloach, is as follows. I had it a second ago. Give me a second. Here. He says, just like we found by Avram Avinu, shehitchil lishol mi bara eila. The first way that he encountered HaKadosh Baruch Hu was the question of who created this. Ki mi kaima l'she'ela, the Zohar HaKadosh says. Because the question of me, the question of who, means that there's a certain limit of my mind that knows that there's something that's expressing something, but I don't know who it is, and I can therefore say, who is it? I can't grasp what they're giving me, I can't grasp exactly where it's coming from, but by saying who has created these, I am connecting to the giver of those things. The name Elohim, the Zohar HaKadosh says, is the connection between me and Elah. Eila means these. It means identifiable things, graspable things. But when a person encounters graspable things, the Socratic method of processing and reasoning means that I will question until I come back to the place of not knowing. So all of my contemplation of revealed reality will bring me to a place of the questioning of who, but who is the one who created this? And while I might not be able to find an orientation to that answer, what the Meshiloach is saying is that Avram Avinu's very questioning of who was proof enough that there was a source of all of the things that were given over. And Zak the Sod Yesharim, he says, Kamosha Matzinu Gabe Avram Avinu, Shehitchil Lishol Mi Bara Eila. He started to ask the question of who created these. He's Mi Kaima L'She'ela K'De Isa B'Medrash. Shesha'al Avram Avinu asked, Mihu Bal Habira, who is the master of this place? Ad Sheheshiv Lo Hashem Yisparach. Hashem answers him, but what was the answer? Says Zos HaShe'ela Hu Meyaste Haaretz. That your question itself is the thing upon which the earth is going to be stretched out. V'zos HaShe'ela B'alma Hu Teretz Mafsik. And this question itself is enough of an answer. Ki halo ein mi sheyoshel zos hashela. There's nobody else asking this question. Who put in your mind to ask the question me? Who put in your mind to question the absence of HaKadosh Baruch Hu? Who told you HaKadosh Baruch Hu is supposed to be present? Elamah, by dint of the fact that you're questioning his absence, implies that you're aware of the fact that he should be present. And Memela, by questioning the absence of his presence, you're already tapping into his presence, as Rav Tzadok says. That the question itself contains the answer because the fact that I'm bothered enough is enough of a proof that there's something to be bothered by.
And that's really just the first step. I mean, in Pesach, we are supposed to come to a place of Emunah where we
come to a place, a relationship that allows for the room of questioning. When we end, the Chassam Sofer says the entire Pesach Seder ends with a paradox. It ends with complete unreasonableness in the secret of Chad Gadya, because really the Malach HaMavis was right. If you look at the entire process of the Chad Gadya, who was right, who was wrong, who was evil, who was correct, the Malach HaMavis had the right to come and be Shoichet the Shochet. So HaKadosh Baruch Hu is coming to Shoichet the Malach HaMaves, so in accordance with Yediyah and knowledge, so the whole thing doesn't make sense.
But the Haggadah itself, we do get answers.
We give answers, but it's the hermeneutical freedom.
But then the answer is also the Suda. It's also, so we're putting ourselves back in the experience. In a
Right.
sense, isn't that the answer?
And the experience is Sheila V'Tshuva. And the answer, and that's exactly what we're saying. The return back to the experience through the event of Seder night is a return back to the questioning and answering.
They weren't b'sheila. It's the
right before Kriyas Yamsuf they were b'sheila, and right after Kriyas Yamsuf they were b'sheila, and there were Jews who, in the midst of Kriyas Yamsuf, who were b'sheila, carrying their avodah zarah. And when a person is in the moment of nes, it's ein bal hanes makir beniso, so they didn't have the ability to question at that point. The emuna does not negate the reality of questioning, and I want to make sure that we'll get to the nakuda that I'm trying. I'm happy to kind of respond to all of the questions.
To a place where one can be in relationship. I mean,
Absolutely,
there's
but a relationship.
Where you're even, can I be in relationship?
No, but so absolutely, but that's not the questioning we're talking about. But and I hope I made that clear, that the questioning over here is one that's the cultivation of a relationship. It's not the negative view of questioning that says a question needs to be gotten rid of so that the answer can take its rightful place. It's the value and the inherent ontological value of questioning that is there even when it's just me alone. It's not for the sake of an answer.
But the question doesn't dominate. What dominates is the relationship. The question is part of
So what I'm trying to say in this year is that the question is what's dominating. That's what I'm trying to say, and that the nature of the relationship is modeled through the ability to question. There's a safety that allows a person to ask a question. In an obedient relationship where a person is terrified to ask a question, that does not represent a modeled basis of a dialectical relationship. The dialectical relationship that allows for porous boundaries between self and God and self, and one through prayer, which is referred to as she'ela, and one through Torah, which is she'ela v'tshuva, is the awareness and the confidence that we have in our role with HaKadosh Baruch Hu, that we don't have to have this obedience that denies any possibility of question, but there's a freedom to question, because the basis of the relationship is rooted in something far more than a revealed answer. That make sense?
The revealed answer is part of it as well.
Absolutely. But any other process, right? We're not talking about non-knowledge. We're not talking about a religion that denies the necessity of trying to clarify every single thing. We have shelves and shelves in our base medrash by Sfarim called Shilos v'Tshuvos. And those become fundamental pieces of our library. But the Sheila is a fundamental piece of the process of uncovering wisdom.
But the experience is, so
each person experiences it in their own way.
that's right, because that comes back to the experience.
So he was working from a language of philosophical yediyah, in spite of the fact that if a person digs down deep into the Kuzari, what they'll come to is the fact that there's questioning at the heart of it as well. Emunah, by definition, is always something that is preceded by a question and then a decision to live with emunah. Yes, we have Yud Gimel Ikrim, which identify the clarified wisdom and the path of what knowledge is and what faith looks like, but ultimately, and with this we're going to go further, I believe that the experience and the experiential process of what's happening on Leil HaSeder is an entrance into the value of questioning, because that's where the relationship is built. It's an entrance into what's referred to as moichin of bina. Bina is the awareness that mevin davar mitoch davar, I'm questioning, I don't have absolute clarity, and only afterwards can we access a certain point on Shavuos of chachma, which is when there's really no questions. But what the Sod Yesharim continues to say is as follows. He says that these questions that you're asking are enough of an answer. Ki halo ein mi sheyishol zos hashela. There's no one who's asking these questions. Ela ata, you're the only one. Umizeh ba'atzmo, and from this itself, tucha lehochiach mishuhu bal habira. And from this itself, a person is able to come to a place of recognizing who the bal habira was. How? There was no answer to the question, but rather the fact that his neshama was questioning, the fact that the neshama is perpetually seeking out an answer to a question that it does not even know that it's asking, is proof enough that the soul is inherently connected to HaKadosh Baruch Hu. It's not a sheila that comes from a place of insecurity. It's not a sheila of questioning whether the relationship was there to begin with. At first glance, what we learn on Purim is that we don't know anything whatsoever. And in the end of the day, everything is going to be tali b'safek. The derech of sheila v'tshuva, the derech of asking a question and answering the question and opening up another question and to live in the space of the question, is to realize that if I'm going to build a relationship with you, Rabbanu Shalom, from that place of not knowing anything, then it will have to be a vulnerable one that contains a hidden secret of certainty that rests at the core of it, but not an earned certainty. An earned certainty will never arrive.
And this relationship of she'ela, would you say that it applies to the ma and the me, or more to the ma or more to the me?
It applies to both. It applies to both. The me question is more one that will be satisfied and more satisfied without an answer. The ma sheila is the one that we encounter in our lives, where shilas and shuvas, where we really want clarification.
Would you say, how does the questioning work as a proof that we're connected?
The emergence of the questioning spirit within the self. It's not the particular question that's being asked, but it's the fact that I am bothered enough by the external way that things appear and the conflict that has with my inner ideal of how things should be, that I have the desire to ask a question rather than to trace it back to a chaotic space that's devoid of any answerability. And so by asking the question, one has already revealed that inherent within the self is a pre-existing assumption that there is an intelligible response. And that itself is an act of faith. Hashem is asking Avram, where do you think that pre-existent itch that you had to ask the question comes from? And the answer is that's the neshama. That there's a pre-existence to the soul that rests within the individual prior to any coming onto knowledge. And so the Eichbitzer is saying that the fact that you're bothered, the fact that when one looks around at reality and they say this is theoretically not how it should be, how, why, I don't need proof as to know why I have to ask that question. But the fact that I have that question and that I'm bothered enough shows that I carry with myself that mark of what it means to be a Jew. That mark of what it means to be like Avram, who was met with an unanswered quest. He was told to go and wander without destination. The wandering is the question. The destination is the answer. Avram Avinu was told to quest, right? The process of questing away from a place, going on a quest, trying to find a place. Avram Avinu was wandering. It was lech lecha. He didn't demand more of an answer. He didn't demand where. All he needed to know was that there was some semblance of a source of all things that can theoretically answer the question. Like the Kedushas Levi is saying, I don't need answers to all these questions. I just need to know that I can have emunah that these answers will be answered at some point. Chavetz Chaim said it, my Sabi used to say this after Auschwitz. He says, without emunah, there's no answer to any question. But with emunah, so a person doesn't need an answer to any question. It's the ability to live in the question. Only Eliyahu Hanavi comes and teaches us how to answer up the unanswered questions and how to live with the unanswerable questions, which is the culmination of the Seder night. With Tish B'Yavo v'Yataritz Kushus v'Abayos, that Eliyahu Hanavi comes, and that's the secret of Teku at the heart of the Gemara when we encounter an unanswerable question, and that's the beginning of Tikkun. So what the Meshilach is saying is, it's not that Avram Avinu asked a question to the Baal Habira and then the Baal Habira stood in front of him and answered his question. That implication in the Medrash should be Hitzitz Elav Baal Habira, that the Baal Habira revealed himself towards him, meaning towards his question. He didn't get an answer. It wasn't. It was. I don't know the status of what Avram Avinu's relationship with HaKadosh Baruch Hu at that state was in terms of its nevuah, but it was hitzitz alav, meaning the answer was the question itself. The answer was look at yourself. Hitzitz alav, the alav, meaning the Meshilach is saying the fact that you're questioning is in and of itself the answer, and so the questioning leads to the playfulness and the capacity to maintain the depth of relationship in spite of the fact that there seems to be an ingredient of certainty that is missing. This is the derech of education with the children. This is allowing the child to steal the matzah or to hide the matzah, and it's a game of hide and go seek. And it's why even a person who's alone has to ask b'derech shayla v'tshuva, because the question itself is the place where the light is going to come out. A person who thinks they have certainty, a person who thinks they have no room for questioning anymore, is a person who has not yet opened themselves up to the secret that faith exists far beyond knowledge. Listen to the language that the Meshilach, the Sod Yesharim says over here. V'she'ena yodea lishol at pasachlo, and he who doesn't know how to ask at pasachlo. Hainu. Kemosha Amar Avi Moiri, Hagoyin HaKadosh, the Beis Yaakov said, Asher mi shelo made divrei Torah, someone who's learning divrei Torah, ve'eno kasha lo b'shum kushya, and they don't have any question, they're not bothered by anything, zehu simin muvhak shelo naga adayin b'divrei Torah. It's a clear sign that they have not yet even begun to scratch the surface of that divrei Torah. Ki me'achar shahaseichel shel divrei Torah hu be'emes lahepech me'aseichel shel zeh ha'olam. Because by definition, the light of HaKadosh Baruch Hu's light, which is the light of the Torah, stands in nearly direct opposition to this world. V'im kein mehechan yasher be'enav kol kach. From whence does a person gain so much clarity that they understand exactly what's being said? V'lo kasha lo shum kushya, ele batach lefi shelo naga adayin behem. The clear thing is that if you haven't asked a question yet, it's clear that you haven't even begun the process. Ulam, misha kasha lo b'divrei Torah, someone who has a question on divrei Torah, umiyageya atzmo, and they put the effort in, and I think this can come back to exactly what you're saying about living in the answer as well. Achar kach letaritz zosu divrei Torah. When a person clarifies the question itself, when a person embraces the question, it's not that all questions are unanswerable. There are infinite answers. Again, shalos v'tshuvos. We have thousands and thousands of svarim that are based on appropriate answers given to questions, but they don't exclude the opportunity for somebody else giving an answer. And it doesn't exclude the reality that that might not be the final answer. It's far more about the mechanism of how Chazal's work and Das Torah works that makes that answer the actual answer. But the awareness of the power of questioning is also the fact that our limited perspective of things is limited. This is how Eov is responded to by HaKadosh Baruch Hu. Eov in Parak Lamed Ches, after all is said and done, Eov encounters the biggest kasha in the world, the biggest teku in the world. And the answer that HaKadosh Baruch Hu gives him are all of the 50 questions in the 38th parak in Eov. The 50 shiurim of Bina, the 50 questions of Bina, the back and forth of not knowing, thinking I know, not knowing, thinking I know. Hashem answers Eov from the whirlwind and he says, where were you? Who are you? What are you? What am I? Where do you think you are? And how are these questions meant to comfort Eov? How are these questions meant to give comfort to a tired soul that has found itself in exile for so long? But by HaKadosh Baruch Hu responding with an answer, there's a reflection of find me within the question itself. Find me within the screaming out towards me where you don't find me. Find me in the lack of knowledge prior to the arrangement of a clarified sugya. Find me in the yigiyah. Every question in Tosfos, every question on a Rishon is a tefillah to HaKadosh Baruch Hu. Hidden within every question that he had asked. I had an uncle who passed away a few years ago. He was limited, but we grew up with this. Every Seder, and I don't mean to be, I don't mean to bring something that's not necessarily refined into the sugya, but we would come with all of our Haggados, and we would ask all of the questions. My 4 brothers and I, we would have, my 3 brothers and I, we would have all of the questions with all of our lumdis, and then my uncle at the end, he said, but what about the Holocaust? It's taka right. What about the Holocaust? Meaning to say that a person can have a million answers to every question that they want to ask, but there's no answer yet. A person is at the heart of every answer given to any question, there's a deeper question. And every question that Yid asks of why is also Ribbon Shalom, where are you? And every question of what is also Ribbon Shalom, where are you? And every question of Hashem, help me with my parnasa, is where are you? And help me with my children is where are you? And help me with this. All of it is the direct singular question that rests at the heart of the Jewish neshama that is perpetually seeking the clarity that only HaKadosh Baruch Hu can reveal. And we have learned over and over to find redemption through that. The secret of Yiddishkeit is how to find redemption even prior to redemption. We have not claimed that redemption has arrived like others have because they haven't learned the secret of learning to be patient within the process towards redemption. We learn to live redemption, to taste redemption each and every day within exile itself, to realize that redemption is going to arrive in a way that we don't really know how or what or when, but it's going to come. It's Pesach Hadas. But the shaila, even after all of the answers to the shailos, there's also going to be a nafshi b'she'elasi, a teku, a tishbiyav v'yataritz kushas abayos of I don't know. And this transition is what gives us the gift of what really comes out of Mitzrayim, which is the secret of Torah Shabbal Peh. The Tikkunei Zohar says something incredible, that we were punished b'chomer u'levenim, da kal v'chomer v'da liban halacha. The punishment that was allotted to us in exile was the need to go down into disclarity and to clarify sugyos and to struggle and to be hit with a suffix and to be hit with a shaila over here and to struggle all over the place and to have a chasuri mechsera and to have the Gemara be mebulbal like Talmud Bavli, which is b'choshech chashiveni kamasei olam. Chazal, in their self-awareness, they said, where is Talmud Bavli from the Torah? B'machshechem hoshivani kamasei olam. You have restored me in darkness like the dead of the world. Talmud Bavli is the clarification of Bilbul Hadas, of what happens when we don't have clarity, when we find ourselves in exile. And the Gemara is ultimately a secret of Gemar Aleph, to come back to a place of realizing Aleph over and over and over again. But within the process of Gemara learning, question and answer is a fundamental process to it. The Shakla V'Tarya, the questions, you take the questions out of Gemara, and what you're left with is answers. You're left with, you don't have Gemara anymore. There were tzaddikim who tried to do this from a halachic perspective. But the entire concept of Torah Shabbal Peh is the willingness for a person to encounter the chomer v'levenim, kal v'chomer, libun halacha, that by questioning, by cultivating the willingness and the trust to question, because Hashem, if I'm terrified that my belief in you is based on an answer to a certain question, then I'm going to be terrified to ask the question. Because let's say I can't get an answer, and then I have to let go of my belief, and that's the one thing that I need most desperately. But when we graduate from that perspective of a faith that is dependent on knowledge, and we realize that there's no amount of knowledge anywhere that can provide a person with enough information to make faith the rational choice necessarily. At the core, faith is going to be a leap. It's going to be a not knowing. And that's the light of Pesach. That's the light of Geula. When a person frees themselves to believe deep enough in the relationship that I can wander around the Daf Gemara. I can learn, I can spend weeks trying to understand the kasha of a Rishon. without coming to clarity of what the answer to that kasha is, and that's as fundamental a process of Talmud Torah as the answer itself is. Because in Yiddishkeit, it's the she'ela, it's the questioning, it's the kasha that we find. The entire world is a kasha on HaKadosh Baruch Hu. But Rabbi Nachman says something very important. He says that we have to remember that every kasha that a person encounters, any makom of concealment in the mind that a person encounters, is another opportunity for a person to yearn towards HaKadosh Baruch Hu, to draw down more light and to find a light of faith that contains my ability to find you, Hashem, no matter where I am. And that's why kasha is Roshei Tevos Shema Hashem Koli Ekra. That Shema Hashem Koli Ekra, that every kasha that I'm asking is seeking you out within the question itself. And avada, I'll get an answer. But avada, that answer will also have questions on it. And avada, I'll have another answer to that. But avada, more questions will emerge. And that each and every day a person has to see to it as if they're leaving Yetzias Mitzrayim. And everything is matchil b'genusum Messiah b'shvach, starting with the question and ending with the clarified answer. But if we devalue the question and only seek the answer, then the questions of our lives are going to be seen as secondary spiritual states where I can't find HaKadosh Baruch Hu, where I'm removed from HaKadosh Baruch Hu, where I'm functioning in a low level of functioning. But when I allow myself to value the question as significantly as I value the tshuva, so then even when I'm not in a state of clarified das, even when I have katnus hamoichin, even when all I have is ma, all I can eat is matzah, all I can eat is maror, all I can do is mutter the words themselves of the Haggadah. At that place, I can believe that within the Sheila itself, nafshi b'she'elasi, on the night of Shaila v'tshuva, we prepare ourselves to open the door for Eliyahu Hanavi. And the light of Eliyahu Hanavi is the light of Tishbi Yavu v'yataritz kushus v'abayos. The answer to all of the tiyuftas is not that all of them will have an answer. It's that it's okay for there to be a tiyufta. It's okay for there to be something that's not clarified. Because achin ata kel mistater. Achin ata kel mistater. In the end of the day, Hashem, you are a concealed God. And for us to be ever in a place of absolute clarity of knowledge and absolute grasping, like the Sod Yesharim says, that's a place of not having even begun the process of trying to understand. And yes, so the derech of Sheila leads to every ounce of tshuva itself. Every shar of bina is a question and an answer, a question and an answer, a question and an answer. The Rebbe of Baruch of Mezhebush, tells of his Talmud, who was a yachid, a student who had das Elokim, had the knowledge of God in a profoundly deep way. But he searched too far and he asked too much and he was chayker too deeply, and he came to a place of not being able to have an answer, and he could not traverse the abyss in his mind that had opened up. And so he ran to Mezhebush and he was banging on his Rebbe's door, banging on the Rebbe of Baruch's door. And the Rebbe of Baruch said, listen, every question that a person asks is one of the shiurim of Bina that were given over to Moshe Rabbeinu. Every answer that's given is another shar. When you come to the 50th shar of Bina, that's the place where the answer was not given to the question of the 49th shar. Moshe Rabbeinu didn't necessarily receive the 50th gate. We're told that he was lacking the 50th gate. The 50th gate is the answer that will answer all questions. And the Rebbe of Baruch said, we don't have that right now. But what we do have is a stand-in for that, which is Emunah. And he says, come walk with me and we'll traverse the abyss together. That knowledge of the fact that very often the she'ela itself is going to be the way that a person encounters HaKadosh Baruch Hu. Because that's how a person really lives out the desire that Rabbi Nachman wanted, the Ramchal did this as well, was to turn the Torah into a tefillah. The Haggadah is an in-between space of Torah and tefillah. It's avodah, it's where the entire Torah, where the drushim are part of the Suda, are part of the tefillah itself, the moichin are coming down, the consciousness of God is coming down at the time of the Seder in the drashos Chazal themselves. Usually we learn in order to prepare for an experience, but in the process of Pesach, the learning itself is the experience. The learning becomes tefillah. Rabbi Nachman said a person has to be mahapich their Torah into tefillah. Anytime that we're trying to find some intellectual stability in our lives, we have to ensure that it comes out with a tefillah yearning for more revelation from HaKadosh Baruch Hu. And so what we do with the Haggadah is we're connecting ourselves to that which is endless. And by definition, to connect to that which is endless means there will be an infinite gradation of concealment and revelation, which is why, as far as I understand, when Yidden are having Seder in Yerushalayim this year, they're still going to say L'Shana Haba Yerushalayim. Because there's always an element of being displaced. Until Mashiach comes, there's displacement. There's a lack of hatama. There's a lack of complete and utter alignment. There is a slight deviation that, in fact, calls everything into question. Even in Yerushalayim, even in Beis HaMikdash. And it's our job to cultivate in Pesach is to open up our mouths from the place that we find ourselves and to draw redemption into the place that we are at. And to realize that we are the ones who walk through the sea. They don't get an answer to the question. They don't get an answer to the question. Ma titzak alai. You're screaming ma to me, says HaKadosh Baruch Hu, to Daber B'nai Yisrael. Teach them to walk. And in that place of learning to live with the question, learning to live with the fact that in spite of all of the answers and the wonderful answers, there will always be the truest answer of all, which is ani ma'amin. Ani ma'amin. That's independent of anything else. In that place, a person can live freely in the space of questioning, and the questions can be transformed into the building blocks of finding HaKadosh Baruch Hu in our lives. And when we say Manishtana, we can mean Manishtana, and we can daven every word of the Haggadah to bring about Geula Shlema, which is the true tshuva itself. Be'ezras Hashem.
In Yemos Mashiach, will there still be something?
Always, always. Always, always, always. There's gradational growth always, but there's a 6th millennia that goes to a 7th millennia, and then the 7th millennia goes to the 8th, to the 9th, to the 10th, because HaKadosh Baruch Hu's infinitude is perpetually ascendant from ours, no matter how high we go. Bevadai, bevadai. It won't be the same bechlal, but there will always be, meaning now the difficulty is mamish difficult, suffering. In the future with redemption, we know that suffering ends to one degree or another. So how do we live with the value that suffering provides a person in this world, the ability to connect to HaKadosh Baruch Hu in a deeper way in exile? So that same tenua, the movement of concealment and revelation will still be there, but the pain and the human element of it will be reduced to a degree that it will be hamavdil ben kodesh l'kodesh as opposed to hamavdil ben kodesh l'chol. But there will always, always, always be. That's the one thing that we can know for certain, is that we will never have absolute clarified certainty where there is no longer any reasonable moment of concealment.
As I recall, the Chanan explains growth as a viewer, Chazaka as Hanhana. So is that different from what Reb is saying?
I would have to learn inside. It's a great question. I mean, the Lumdis of Safek, and the Lumdis of Safek is an amazing, amazing sugya. I'm not holding in it right now enough to be able to answer, but the machshava behind the Lumdis of Safek is a sefer that hasn't been written yet. I mean, Rav Shimon Shkop did in Shar Yosher and Kuntrus Asveikos, also all of these svarim. Like the Shar Yosher has something, he says that the Safek, the Tumah of a Sota, is the Safek of the Sota itself. That's the Tumah. That's a different one. Right, B'shus Rabbim, that's the Safek Betzim.
When it comes to questions of treif meat and kosher,
Yeah.
you go after rov sometimes, even though you know that one is. So, I don't know what I'm asking.
So reality, I mean, look, the miracle of halacha, the miracle of the halachic system. Right, so the miracle of the halachic system is the linchpin that holds it all together. And it also operates in a way, if the Tikkun Zohar says halacha is hariyu Hashem kol haaretz. How and why, and the secret of Elu ve'elu divrei Elokim chayim, and the secret of Rabbi Meir, who was able to give memtes panim tahor to memtes panim tameh, what, he's revealing that it's all a joke? No, it's not a joke, chas v'shalom, but it's the das of Moshe that's mispashet through Chazal in accordance with the klalim that were developed and how halachic principles take shape and take root. But it's still a lamal mitam b'das.
In the world of Asiya, like you have to come to some...
Absolutely, psak. But psak is an undoing of the suffix, but it's also not a denial to the reality of Elu ve'elu divrei Elokim chayim. But it is, absolutely. The Maisa is the Iker. The Maisa is the Iker, and on a certain level, the Maisa itself is Magdir. It reveals the Iker in a new way, so that the Maisa itself is what happened in reality. But nevertheless, that's not because it's the only possible option of truth value. Yeah?
It seems like what you're saying depends on a certain quality of question, meaning that questions reveal an understanding that there's order and that there's justice.
But even the questioning of order itself, even the denial of order itself, is
question and they conclude chaos.
There is the philosophical notion that you're touching upon, and I know what I'm describing as touching upon that also, is that you can say to someone who comes and theoretically denies the value of any system of order, and their question will be, why do good things happen to bad people? And you'll be able to say, well, according to you, why should you be able to question anything? The fact that you're questioning implies that you already believe in a pre-existent order. So that's the externalized kind of casing of what I'm trying to describe, and it's a true one, but what I think the Ishbitzer Tzaddikim are talking on is a far more sublingual level, where the movement of the self and the tnua, the movement within self when it encounters concealment and struggle, to extend itself outwards in the hopes of finding relief from HaKadosh Baruch Hu in the guise of an answer, is the deepest proof available. And that is something that is singularly unique to the very fabric of the neshama, pre-existent to any question of seeking out clarification. Does that make sense? Meaning the neshama itself is tamid mitpalel, as Rav Kook says. The neshama is always in a state of yearning. Yearning is questioning. It's just not yet knowing what the question is. Meaning, and that's the condition that Ishbitz is pointing out. And that's why their Torah, and Rav Tzadok's Torah especially, becomes, in my mind, such a fundamental ground where Yediyah has to start from, because they start where existentialism has ended. Existentialism questions all meaning to an incessant degree. And they come to the place that meaning is unstable. And so Hasidus, especially in Ishbitz and Radzin, they start from the fact that, okay, naniach, that reality is unstable and there's not going to be any clarification. So how are we going to find HaKadosh Baruch Hu? And it's within the questioning itself, and it's within the conditions of what it means to be a soul that exists in a state of exile, to cultivate the inner workings of that process. And the questioning, the doubt, the not knowing, then take on far more significant roles in spiritual work than they would in a system that's built primarily on trying to fix things as best I can and bring redemption even prior to redemption. Make sense? Any other questions, Chevra?
A lot of questions.
Sure, a lot of questions. But it also, I think it does, it animates, and on a practical level, Kan Ben Shoel, every tefillah, a person doesn't have to know what they're asking HaKadosh Baruch Hu of, right? Anshe Knesset HaGadolah have given us a really, really incredible tool that far exceeds any knowledge that we can ever have of how it works, which is the matbeya of tefillah. And so those words, those vehicles, are profoundly significant in getting the point across and doing what they need to do, irrespective of what we know about those words or not. Those are weapons, right? Those are the klei zayin of Mashiach. Every word uttered from the siddur is going up and it's going to do what it needs to do. But even when a person is opening themselves up to Kan Ben Shoel, that I have a lot of questions for you, HaKadosh Baruch Hu. I want things in my life. I want to know why this area I don't feel chayrus in. I want to know how I can find chayrus in this area. And it's the questioning spirit that rests even prior to the ability to enunciate questions. You go to someone who's in a state of lowliness of spirit, or someone who's feeling anxious about something, and you say, just say the question, just ask. The person is going to say, if I had the energy to try and run away from here, I would, because there is no question to be asked. It's the simple reality of the question itself. There's always an unquestioned question at the heart of every moment. When two people are connected together, what we should be asking ourselves is like, how did this happen? How does Tzimtzum actually work? Or how is it that we're sitting here? Meaning there's so many things that can be actually asked about prior to coming to the place that we find ourselves in conscious awareness, but we simply don't ask those questions because we have to function. But there are millions and millions of questions that rest behind any clarified position of experience that a person finds themselves in. Just as there's tzimtzum achar tzimtzum that precedes any revelation. The same way that you see, when you would see Rav Chanan give a shir, the Rosh Yeshiva of old give a shir, you would understand you were seeing a finished product, but there was an endless process of preparation and questioning and birur and libun, where you read an Igros Moshe. So was Moshe Feinstein just giving us a finished product? No, built upon that is every assumption about what Torah means from the beginning into its practical application through this lens of the halachic shaila. But we have to attune ourselves to the question. It's always there. There's always a spirit of questioning. The only thing is that on Pesach, the or of Sheila is revealed, and that's where the Gula comes from. We allow ourselves to be free enough to ask the questions. Seder Chevra. Okay.